With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin.
Retired Marine Corps officer Donald Kehoe is widely regarded as the father of the UFO cover-up theory. In books, magazines, and broadcast appearances during the 50s and 60s, the bulldogish Kehoe became the single most painful dagger in the belly of the Air Force, a relentless crusader who relied on his own military sources to expose Pentagon lies about UFOs, and there were plenty.
They are simply following orders to explain away all UFO sightings as quickly as possible when they become public and deny that UFOs really exist.
The Air Force went to such extremes in trying to explain away UFOs that it lost credibility, even with sympathetic media. On the surface, all was calm, but behind the scenes, military officials were greatly concerned. They worried that these unidentified objects might be advanced weapons from an enemy nation, so secret studies were begun. A joint Army-FBI study concluded that the objects were real, not imaginary, that they appeared to be metallic, disc-shaped, manufactured craft capable of great speeds and evasive maneuvers. The existence of this study was kept secret until 1976, 29 years later. The Air Force began its own study centered at Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio and dubbed Project Sign. In August of 1948, a top-secret evaluation was written based on an analysis of 200 early cases. The Project Sign report concluded, astonishingly, that UFOs were almost certainly interplanetary craft. But when the document was forwarded to Chief of Staff Hoyt Vandenberg, the general disagreed with the conclusion and ordered all copies of the report destroyed. Vandenberg later confided that such a conclusion would have, quote, caused a stampede, meaning widespread panic. Air Force staffers got the message. Any conclusion that UFOs were from somewhere else was unacceptable. They rewrote their report, reached no conclusion, and that report was accepted. Despite the inconclusive bottom line, this report was also kept secret until 1985. That was the last gasp for objective UFO studies. Project Sign was renamed Project Grudge. According to a later congressional report, the primary job of Grudge was to explain all UFO sightings. One indication of the Air Force's true view of UFOs was found in this chapter from a military textbook being used at the Air Force Academy in the late 60s. The Air Force was teaching its finest cadets that it is not psychological, that some UFOs appear to be craft controlled by aliens, and that there may be as many as 4 types of aliens visiting this planet. The Air Force's own words. When word of this chapter leaked to the public, it was pulled from the curriculum. Another indication of how seriously UFOs were taken was the level of secrecy assigned by the Pentagon. In the mid-1960s, the U.S. was engulfed in an intensive 2-year UFO wave, during which hundreds of thousands of Americans claimed to have seen UFOs. Alan Hynek, Project Blue Book's designated explainer, inadvertently punctuated the mid-60s flap when he announced that UFO sightings by hundreds of Michigan residents were inspired by swamp gas, an excuse which was ridiculed nationally and which prompted calls for a congressional inquiry into UFOs. Under pressure, the Air Force agreed to sponsor what it called an independent scientific study of UFOs. Several universities declined the job, which eventually went to esteemed University of Colorado physicist Dr. Edward Condon. But any hopes for an objective study were dashed even before the project began. Condon himself stated in public that the government should get out of the UFO business and that UFO writers should be horsewhipped. His project coordinator caused his own stir when one of his memos was leaked, stating that the staff would consist of non-believers and that the, quote, trick would be to make the study appear objective. The great UFO wave of 1952 had attracted the attention of the CIA, which was concerned that a foreign power might be able to exploit America's saucer craze. So a panel of scientists was convened to consider UFOs, the so-called Robertson Panel. Members spent a total of 12 hours over 3 days reviewing the UFO evidence and concluded there was nothing to worry about. UFOs were not a threat to national security. However, the continued reporting of UFOs could be a threat, the panel said, and it recommended an official policy of debunking so that flying saucers would be stripped of their aura of mystery. The Robertson panel also recommended that UFO groups and researchers should be monitored. Armed with these recommendations, the CIA and military intelligence agencies swung into action with a plan that is still being carried out. Ridicule those who see UFOs, spy on people who research UFOs, confuse the public with disinformation. For example, plans were drafted to enlist the aid of Walt Disney in belittling the UFO mystery. Popular TV host Arthur Godfrey was also to be recruited. CIA staffers so thoroughly infiltrated the leading UFO organizations of the day that most of them collapsed from within. Intelligence agencies who secretly plotted to make certain that the media and the public would never take UFOs too seriously, and that anyone who did take UFOs seriously would be subjected to ridicule and laughter. The Condon report predictably concluded that UFOs weren't worth studying, and the Air Force used the Condon report as a reason to cancel Blue Book altogether in 1969.
None of the evidence that I have examined would indicate any proof at all that we are being visited by extraterrestrials.
Hynek, of course, would soon change his mind about Blue Book and about UFOs, and would become the most important figure in the history of American ufology. The Air Force contention that UFOs were not a threat to national security was contradicted over and over by the military's own files. A secret order issued in 1960 to all Air Force commanders stated flat out that the Pentagon considers UFOs to be, quote, serious business, and no wonder. UFOs had been seen most often over sensitive nuclear and military installations, including Oak Ridge National Lab, Los Alamos, White Sands, Savannah River, and dozens of other defense installations.
Tonight, have UFOs shut down our government's defense systems? Good evening. We begin with shocking allegations that UFOs have interfered with missiles at U.S. Air Force bases, and aliens are monitoring nuclear warheads and bombs. Our first guests claim UFOs have activated missile systems at 5 Air Force bases in 5 different states. They also claim a cover-up.
There are hundreds of declassified documents which indicate that UFOs have demonstrated a distinct and ongoing interest in our nuclear weapons sites. I've also interviewed nearly 100 gentlemen who were involved in these incidents at various Air Force bases. This is very widespread. What you're seeing here this evening is the tip of the iceberg.
1967, I was on duty as a missile launch officer. I get calls from my guards upstairs. First, I get one call saying that they're seeing strange lights flying in the sky, and I didn't pay too much attention to that. About 5 minutes later, the main security guard, the flight security controller, calls down, says he's looking at a glowing red object, very large, hovering over the front gate. He wants to know what to do. I tell him to secure the facility. We hang up. I go to tell my commanders. So within seconds of that call, my missiles start shutting down. I recall losing all 10 of them.
By shutting down, we mean what?
By shutting down, what I mean is they were not launchable. They were in a no-go condition, disabled.
And you were in the Air Force?
Yes, I was in the Air Force.
Where were you when this was happening?
Okay, I was a targeting officer, missile targeting officer. I was at home relaxing, and I got a call from Job Control to tell them to come in. A missile had gone down. My job as a targeting officer was to bring him back up. Montana.
What did you make of the story?
Well, I know that it's true. I went into Job Control after I got to the hangar. I was called in, went to the hangar, went to the Job Control, and I noticed they have a map of the whole complex with green lights where the missiles were good, but there's one small area with 10 red lights. Means those missiles were out.
I was officer in charge of optical instrumentation at Vandenberg Air Force Base from 1963 to 66. And our job was to photograph with high-speed instrumentation every missile launch from Vandenberg going down the test range. The Air Force flew in a huge catadioptric telescope from the Cape. It was built by Dr. Walter Manning at Boston University. They put the telescope up there, and with that thing, which had a focal length of 2,500 inches, we photographed an Atlas missile raising up out of the fog cover and flying down range. We got all 3 stages of powered flight, and as the dummy warhead and the package flew on down range, we were all celebrating the fact that we had seen the thing and accomplished the mission. When I got back to the base with the film the next day, I was called into the office of Major Florence J. Mansman, And there were 3 people in gray suits standing in there. There was a 16mm camera and a screen set up. Major Mansman said, "Lieutenant, sit down and watch this." And he turned down the lights, turned on the camera, on the projector, and the film came on. And I recognized it as the film that we'd shot at Big Sur the previous day. Toward the end of the flight, I was looking at Major Mansman saying, "Pretty good stuff, huh, sir?" And suddenly he said, "Just watch this." And as I watched, the warhead, the dummy warhead, the chaff that was put out in front of it as a decoy to deflect the Russian anti-missile tracking radar, everything was flying along, and suddenly, in the same direction this stuff was flying at about 8,000 miles an hour, an object came into the frame, shot a beam of light at the warhead, flew up to the top, shot another beam of light at the warhead, flew around the direction it was flying, shot another beam of light at the warhead, flew down, shot another beam of light at the warhead, and flew out the same way it came in. And I said, "We got a UFO." And he said, "Lieutenant, you are never to speak of this again. As far as you're concerned, this didn't happen."
The U.S. government does not obviously appreciate people such as myself and these gentlemen speaking out about this. What we're describing on an ongoing basis, decade after decade, at multiple Air Force bases is disruption of our nuclear missiles.
Late Dr. Robert Sarbacher, one of the most respected scientists of this century and a contemporary of Einstein and Oppenheimer. In letters and personal interviews from the early 80s, Sarbacher conceded that he had told Wilbert Smith about recovered saucers and alien bodies, things which, quote, "didn't originate on Earth." Sarbacher says he was invited to work on these materials, but never did. He also named several other scientists whom he said were definitely involved, said he'd received briefings on the topic while working at the Pentagon, and that the entire matter was the most classified subject in the U.S. government. Because of Sarbacher's scientific stature, many researchers consider his statements to be the most significant ever made on the UFO topic. That the government has no interest in hiding UFO files because there's nothing in them. That view is not borne out by experience. The FBI, for instance, vigorously and repeatedly denied having any UFO files or any interest in the subject. But when the Freedom of Information Act was passed, the G-men reluctantly coughed up 2,000 pages of UFO documents, dating back to the very beginning of the modern UFO era. Write to the CIA to ask for its UFO files, and you'll be told the agency hasn't collected UFO information since the 50s. Yet official documents from the 70s and beyond refer to CIA UFO experts, CIA UFO studies, and the CIA monitoring the UFO situation. Military officials have also been caught telling UFO lies. Both the Air Force and the RAND Corporation denied any knowledge of a secret UFO study commissioned by the Pentagon. Yet, here it is. The RAND study acknowledged the reality of UFOs and said that a solution to the UFO mystery was a matter of the highest urgency.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area, ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their threat. Shells frequently could be seen bursting near the object, but none appeared to hit it. The shooting stopped about 3:30 a.m. Approximately 20 minutes after the firing died down, the ship returned and headed westward from Long Beach toward Santa Monica. The guns went into action again, throwing round after round of shells at the object. The second barrage appeared to be closer to downtown Los Angeles, since watchers could hear the concussion of the guns more clearly, and the flash of bursting shells was brighter. Then the ship disappeared for the second time over the ocean. We return you now to CBS in New York. That was Byron Palmer on the West Coast.
The Battle of LA was the first time that our military actually fired upon a UFO. The next day, the military told the press it was nothing but a weather balloon. Another report was that they fired at nothing due to war nerves. The Army was not too pleased with these reports. If they could not bring down a weather balloon, with almost 1,500 rounds fired and direct hits, then what would they be able to do firing at real enemy targets? This was the first time official denial was put into motion regarding UFOs.
The UFO cover-up has been so well documented over so many years that it has seemingly become part of our popular mythology. It is not a myth. The government's own secret studies concluded decades ago that UFOs were real. Those studies were suppressed, then replaced by public relations shams. Schemes were hatched to ridicule the topic, to confuse the public, to hide the real information. An extensive paper trail reveals that many people had direct knowledge of the cover-up and that many others tried to get the information but were refused. Government agencies routinely lie about what they know. Other agencies issue ridiculous cover stories and disinformation. Scores of witnesses recall what may be the most important event in history. The government says nothing. Other witnesses, including some of our modern-day heroes, have seen the proof with their own eyes, but are ordered to keep quiet. We can't say how many people, if any, know the full story, but certainly there have been many who know more than the rest of us, including some of the most trusted personalities of this century. Scientists like Hermann Oberth, the father of modern rocketry, who said that UFOs are from outer space and that contact had been established. Or his colleague, Werner von Braun, who hinted that closer contact with an alien intelligence was imminent. Or General George Marshall, who also said contact had been made and that UFOs could wipe us out if they wished. Or Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, first director of the CIA, who joined a UFO group after leaving government and who said that the next step is up to the aliens. Or famed scientist Robert Sarbacher, who told colleagues he was invited to work on recovered alien material and that the matter is the most classified subject in the government. Or Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and Winston Churchill, each of whom ordered secret UFO studies in their respective nations. Or future President Gerald Ford, who called for congressional hearings so that Americans could learn the truth about UFOs. Or President Jimmy Carter, who saw his own UFO and who wanted to open all government UFO files, but didn't or couldn't. Or Senator Barry Goldwater, who was denied access to UFO information, but who later wrote that a plan was in the works to let the public know the full story. So what is this plan, and when do we get to see it?